Jim Davis.
Gosh, where do we start? This is one heck of a story, Stuart, and I think... Shall I tell you what struck me most about this? Was you persevered through every possible kind of adversity to make this happen. It simply wouldn't have happened without you. I've been staggered by that, researching your story, really. Do you want to tell me, from everything that's happened to you in the last sort of 30, 40 years, what's the key moment?
The key moment was when my son died.
Before we come to Ben and what happened to him and subsequently what happened to you, do you think then, as a result of your childhood and the nature of some of the adversity you had to deal with there, you developed perhaps a keener imagination than most, or at least a sharper perception of what your imagination could do?
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. I mean, academically, I couldn't do anything at school. I left school without any qualifications, so I was not only beaten by the kids, I was beaten by the masters at school for being stupid. So I constantly had to live in a world where I felt safe, and it turned out to be a world of music in the end.
Coming forward a few years, you did hear that music again, didn't you? In the most tragic of circumstances. Tell us what happened.
Well, by then I was a cook in a pub, and that was my aspiration. If I could dream about getting a job to be a cook, my God, what a wonderful thing that would be. So when I got to that level, I thought, wow, we made it in life. I was married and got a daughter, so everything was going on okay. Nothing spectacular, but okay. And then Ben was due to be born, but previous to Ben being born, I had a dream about him dying, and exactly the circumstances he would die. It was a terrible dream. But when I woke up from it, everything was all right, and even the nurse at the hospital said, don't worry about your wife, she's perfectly fine. But unfortunately, that night when I was cooking for a party of Christmas diners, Ben actually died, and excuse me a minute, because it wasn't just Ben dying. My wife nearly died as well, and I had to become mother and father to Emma, and I had to be strong for Emma, and I didn't know what to do. Had to bury Ben on my own on one horrible Christmas day, freezing cold, just me and my mother, and that night I was completely destroyed. Because no sleep, you don't sleep when things like that happen, because I had to put Emma to bed and she didn't know what had happened to her brother, I didn't know what to say to her, she didn't know what had happened to her mother. I went into this kind of mind thing again from when I was a kid. I went to the place where it was safe for me again, at least for a time anyway. And then suddenly the music came back. So it was a really difficult time. While I was cooking, the music came back again. And I had a griddle in front of me, I was cooking steaks and things, and in that griddle became kind of a video screen of my mind. So I saw the orchestra, I saw all the instruments, and I saw this beautiful song being sung. I thought, wow, I can remember it. That's amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it? Because normally, if you'd had a dream, all of us will have had that experience where you wake up from the dream with no recollection of the detail of what you've just been through or experienced. But this was as vivid to you whilst you were awake as it was whilst you were asleep.
It never left me.
Incredible. What's even more astonishing, I think, about that phenomenon is that you weren't in any way musical, were you?
No.
You couldn't play a musical instrument, you couldn't read or write music in any way, you were no more musical than somebody who enjoys the odd song on the radio.
I was the worst music student you could possibly have.
But here you are with effectively an entire symphony in your head, which you remembered, not just the melody, but the very instruments involved.
And it was good I remembered all the instruments, because I could almost walk through the orchestra in my mind and see the piano and see the trumpets and see the strings and see the cellos. And that was very important for many years later on.
Now, Joe obviously did survive, thank goodness, but it was incredibly traumatic, wasn't it? And it took her a long time to get through all of that. But through all of this, you became very focused, didn't you, on this music that you'd heard, which led you to a huge decision, didn't it?
Yes. It wasn't sort of instant decision, and it was because over a period of like 12 or 18 months, where the music was playing all the time, day and night. And it was like I was getting a message. If you don't go and do this music, I'll plague you until you do. I could no more tell my wife about this dream than I'd had from Ben's death. I couldn't tell her. I was really on the horns of a dilemma. I didn't know what to do. But when she came out of hospital and I looked after her and eventually she got as well as she could be and got stronger, then I started feeding her little bits of information that I'd seen a film about this. What film? Oh, it's a film. I'm going to make a film. I thought that was the easiest way, rather than say, I've heard this music about Ben's death. So I told her about this film I wanted to make. And she said, now at the time, and I said, I've heard it in my head. Now, obviously, people like me would have been diagnosed as schizophrenic.
Potentially, yes.
Without a doubt. Hearing things in your head, telling you to go off and do things. Schizophrenic, no doubt about it. And I knew that. And I was worried about it because, I was told to go and get some therapy, which I didn't want. I wanted to get this music out, So one day I had this voice which said to me, you've got to go to London to do the music. That's where you will do it.
Okay.
And that's when I told her that's what I was going to do, which you can imagine what that cost.
Well, you had your own daughter and an adopted daughter by this point, so you were basically proposing to your wife that you were going to uproot and leave the family to go and try and create a symphony that you'd heard in your head. I can only imagine what her reaction must have been. The universe conspired, though, to eventually allow her to let you do this. She agreed, didn't she? She said, go, you've got 6 months. What were the other terms and conditions?
Well, do it in 6 months or, you got a chance to come back.
Okay. So you went off down to London?
Yep.
Like Dick Whittington with your bag on your back and away you went?
Yep, no money, nothing.
And that in itself was an astonishing part of this story because you ended up living on the streets pretty much, didn't you?
Yeah, for a long time. And that was my kind of wilderness years because when I didn't come back, obviously in that meantime Joe had met somebody else. And eventually she married. And I didn't really have any contact then because I was seen as a very strange person that needed help. I should be in a hospital somewhere, really. So...
Do you forgive them for feeling that way?
I absolutely understand. Totally, of course. But I had several years where, obviously, my ex, who was now remarried, didn't know where I was. And I was not going to tell my daughters, even through letters, how I was living at all.
Okay.
There's no way I would do that and embarrass them.
So how long a period of time was this before you could say that you were, as an individual, perhaps back on your feet again?
Wow. Early 90s, really. Just coming up. Early 90s, so that's 15 years on, isn't it, really?
Yeah. So 15 years after you left home that day. And during that time, you had a couple of key encounters, didn't you? Which really moved this story on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this is where it's amazing even to me, really, that I'm sitting outside the BBC studios in Wood Lane and I used to walk down there just looking at this place. And being, as I thought I was, spiritually tuned in, mad some people would call it, I was watching all these very powerful creative people come out of the BBC and thinking, one day, you'll be playing my music in there and maybe showing the film I want to make that I'd talked about many years ago. And I met Anthony Wade, a jazz musician, just by pure chance. And I was sitting on the pavement, he came walking by and he must have looked at me and thought I was begging, but I wasn't. I was just writing my story. And it was a lovely place to write. he stopped and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" Told him what I was doing, and he walked on. So I thought, okay. And I saw him stop about 50 metres further down and turn around and come back. "What are you doing with your guitar?" I said, I'm learning the guitar. By then I picked it up a little bit.
Okay.